The day I became the most hated man in Willow Creek Shores was the same day I became its most powerful. $1,000. That's what Cheryl Beaumont and her homeowners association fined me for riding a jet ski with my grieving daughter. What they didn't know was that I had millions of reasons to fight back and enough fire to use every single one of them. If you're watching this video from your phone in the bathroom to escape another mind-numbing HOA meeting, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're hiding. I guarantee this story will keep you glued to the screen. The first time I saw my daughter smile after everything we'd been through was out there, on the open water. My name is Jason Cole. Until a few months ago, my life was the kind of slow-moving wreck you don't see coming until it's too late. I was a widower at 40, left trying to raise my daughter Ella in a house that felt too big and far too empty. After my wife Megan passed away from a sudden aneurysm, it was like the light in both our lives had been switched off without warning. Ella stopped laughing. I stopped living. We needed a change. Not just a change of scenery, a change of spirit. That's how we ended up in Willow Creek Shores, a picturesque lakeside community with manicured lawns, white picket fences, and a vast, shimmering lake that promised peace. The real estate brochure was full of sunny promises. Community lake for all residents' enjoyment, outdoor recreation encouraged, family-centered living at its finest. The lake, that was the hook. When Megan was still alive, our family vacations had always centered around water, kayaking, swimming, laughing until our voices were hoarse. I wanted that back for Ella, even just a piece of it. So on a golden Saturday morning, I pulled the bright red Sea-Doo jet ski off the trailer, and Ella practically danced with excitement. Her laugh, sharp and unrestrained, rang through the air as we zipped across the glistening surface, weaving lazy circles and kicking up diamond sprays of water under the warm sun. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't see grief etched into my daughter's face. I saw life. I saw hope. We had been out there for maybe 15 minutes, just two dots against a sparkling blue expanse, when I noticed a figure waving frantically from the dock. At first I thought something was wrong. Maybe someone had fallen. Maybe there was an emergency. I steered us gently back toward shore, Ella clinging to my waist, giggling and dripping wet. That laughter died as soon as we reached the dock. Waiting for us was a woman in her 50s, her platinum hair pulled into a tight bun that looked like it could cut glass. She wore a crisp white polo with the words Willow Creek HOA embroidered in navy on the chest, and a scowl that could sour milk. In her perfectly manicured hand, she held a clipboard. "You there," she barked before we could even dismount the jet ski. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? Motorized vehicles are strictly prohibited on this lake." I blinked. "I'm sorry." "What?" "You heard me," she snapped, thrusting the clipboard toward me. "You're in violation of Section 12B of the Willow Creek HOA regulations. Unauthorized use of motorized watercraft. The fine is $1,000 payable within 14 days. Ella's small hand tightened on my arm. I took a deep breath. "Ma'am, when we bought this house, we were told the lake was for recreational use. It was one of the main reasons we moved here." Her lips curled into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Rules were updated last month. Email notifications were sent to all residents. Ignorance is no excuse." I opened my mouth to argue, but then caught the look in Ella's eyes. The same look I'd seen too many times in the past year. Betrayal, confusion, hurt. This lake was supposed to be our fresh start. Instead, it was turning into another battlefield. "We'll leave," I said quietly, my voice tight with restraint. "Please send me the official notice." Without another word, I guided Ella off the dock, towing the jet ski behind us like a defeated flag. Behind me, I heard the click of the woman's heels on the wood planks. Sharp, precise, victorious. At that moment, something hardened inside me. I didn't know her name yet. I didn't know the full game she was playing. But I knew this much. No one, and I mean no one, was going to steal my daughter's smile again without a fight. That night, long after Ella had fallen asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the lake. It was so still, so beautiful in the moonlight. You'd never guess it had just been used as a weapon against a grieving father and his daughter. $1,000 for 15 minutes of joy. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to shake the anger crawling under my skin. This wasn't about the money, it was about control. Something about the way that woman, that Cheryl Beaumont, as I later learned, smiled when she handed me the fine told me this wasn't just some rule enthusiast enforcing policy. This was about something deeper, something personal. And if there was one thing my years in the Marines had taught me, it was this. Never ignore the first sign of enemy intent. I opened my laptop and started digging. The first thing I found was the Willow Creek HOA website, a slick, corporate-looking page full of stock photos, laughing families, manicured gardens, a pristine lake with a lone fisherman casting a line under golden light. Under rules and regulations, I found a document updated just 3 weeks earlier. Section 12B, Motorized Watercraft Prohibition. But buried 2 lines down was something interesting. Applies to non-registered residents and/or recreational visitors unless explicitly authorized by HOA board. I frowned. Was I considered non-registered? Had my move-in paperwork even been fully processed yet? Scrolling deeper into the bylaws, I found another clause. HOA jurisdiction over lake activities is valid contingent upon active lease agreement with Seabreeze Development Company. Lease agreement? That was odd. If the HOA actually owned the lake, there'd be no need for a lease. Heart beating faster, I pulled up the county property records. 5 minutes later, I sat back in my chair, stunned. The HOA didn't own the lake. They had been leasing it for 30 years from Seabreeze Development, the original developers of Willow Creek Shores. And according to public documents, that lease was set to expire in just 45 days. Suddenly, everything made sense. The updated rules, the sudden hostility toward new residents, the desperate control over how the lake was used. Cheryl Beaumont wasn't protecting the lake for the community. She was protecting a secret, and her grip on it was slipping fast. If the HOA lost their lease, they lost control over the lake entirely. No more fishing bans, no more event monopolies, no more power plays disguised as regulations. And if someone, say a certain angry Marine with a background in logistics and asset management, happened to acquire that lease or better yet, buy the lake outright, a slow, dangerous smile crept across my face. Maybe Cheryl thought she could slap me with a fine and I would just roll over. Maybe she thought she could scare Ella back into silence. She was wrong, dead wrong. The next morning, while most of Willow Creek was busy fussing over their lawns and tennis games, I was sitting across from Peter Langston, an old real estate contact of mine who now specialized in distressed property transactions. "You want to buy a lake?" Peter said, raising an eyebrow over his coffee mug. I nodded. "Small lake, 6 acres, private, owned by Seabreeze Development." Peter whistled low. "Seabreeze, huh? They've been bleeding money since the pandemic. Half their commercial projects folded. If you're serious and you've got cash, they'll listen." I smiled grimly. "I'm serious." Peter leaned in. "What's the angle?" And I told him. "Not everything, just enough." When I finished, he chuckled. "Man, you don't play small, do you?" "No," I said, thinking of Ella's face when that woman barked at her like she was some kind of criminal. "I really don't." For the next 3 days, every spare moment between work and parenting was spent gathering intel. Public meeting minutes showed that Cheryl had been quietly lobbying the HOA board to approve a special assessment and an extra monthly fee for every household under the guise of lake improvement projects. Translation: she needed to raise capital fast, probably to bid for the lake herself once the lease expired. Even more interesting, I discovered several homes in Willow Creek had quietly changed hands over the past 2 years, all sold below market value after being fined repeatedly by the HOA. The buyer? A shell company registered to an address linked directly to Cheryl's husband. She wasn't just running an HOA, she was running a racket, and she thought no one was watching. That night, as I sat in the living room surrounded by printed documents, property deeds, and legal codes, Ella patted out in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Dad," she mumbled sleepily, "what are you doing?" I smiled and pulled her onto my lap, careful to shuffle the papers aside. "Planning," I said simply. "For what?" "For making sure that next time we ride the jet ski," I whispered into her hair, "nobody And I mean nobody, tells you where you can and can't laugh. She smiled against my chest, and I felt something shift inside me. Resolve. Steel hard and unbreakable. The lake wouldn't just be a place we visited anymore. It was about to become ours. Buying a lake isn't like buying a car. It's messy, quiet, dangerous. If you're playing against someone desperate enough to fight dirty. In Cheryl Beaumont, she wasn't just desperate. She was drowning. She just didn't know it yet. Through Peter Langston, I arranged a discreet meeting with Seabreeze Development's senior asset manager, a man named Tom Bradley, at a coffee shop 2 towns over. Neutral ground. No HOA spies lurking. Tom looked exhausted, the way people look when they're tired of trying to spin bad news into something survivable. Look, he said, stirring his coffee absently, Seabreeze needs liquidity. Fast. Our lenders are breathing down our necks. This lake isn't a profit center. It's dead weight. Good, I said simply, because I can close fast, all cash, no financing contingencies. Tom blinked like he wasn't used to someone speaking that language anymore. How fast? He asked carefully. 7 days, 10 tops, depending on title checks. He leaned back, studying me. You're serious. I smiled. Deadly. We hammered out a preliminary agreement that night. $325,000 cash, slightly under market value because I knew they were desperate, pending environmental inspections, which I'd already arranged quietly through a third party. I didn't just want to buy the lake, I wanted the deal airtight, unbreakable, because once I moved, there would be no going back. Meanwhile, back at Willow Creek Shores, Cheryl was tightening her grip. Flyers showed up in every mailbox. Community Lake Improvement Project, special meeting scheduled. The language was polished, friendly. Words like enhancing community value and preserving our unique lifestyle were sprinkled like sugar to hide the real goal. She needed money, lots of it, fast, and she was about to ask every homeowner to pony up. $50 a month extra, indefinitely, to beautify, secure the lake. Translation: build her war chest before the lease expired. But here's the thing about bullies. They're never as smart as they think they are. Because while Cheryl was busy rallying her loyalists, I was burying my roots deeper. Quiet dinners with key neighbors, late-night phone calls with retired attorneys, back-channel conversations with former HOA members who had left in disgust. Everywhere I went, I found the same thing. Anger, resentment, fear, yes, but also a hunger for change. They just needed a spark. I intended to light the match. 4 days before Cheryl's big lake improvement meeting, my offer was formally accepted. The paperwork slid across Tom Bradley's desk with a soft scratch. He signed with a relieved sigh, and just like that, the lake, the shoreline, the docks, all of it belonged to me. On paper, the purchasing entity was listed as Cole Holdings LLC, a shell company I set up weeks earlier. Nothing that would trace back directly to Jason Cole unless you really knew where to look. Secrecy was key, because if Cheryl found out even an hour too soon, she'd pivot, scramble, find some way to poison the well. But if she stood up at that meeting and asked her neighbors for more money, if she overcommitted publicly before learning she'd already lost, then the ground would vanish right under her feet. No recovery, no second chances, only free fall. The night before the HOA meeting, I walked down to the dock alone. The moon floated silver across the dark water, and the air smelled like cut grass and lake mist. I ran my hand along the worn wood of the dock railings. Soon all of this would be mine, not to hoard, but to protect. For Ella, for every kid who needed a place to breathe free, for every parent who just wanted to see their child laugh without fear of fines or judgment. I thought of Megan, too, how she used to close her eyes and tilt her face into the sun, laughing, fearless, alive. She would have loved it here, and she would have hated what it had become. I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted group chat we'd set up among a handful of key residents, people I trusted. Jason, tomorrow is the beginning. Stay strong, stay silent. Let her fall into her own trap. One by one, the green check marks lit up. Ready, waiting. At 6 p.m. sharp the next evening, the HOA clubhouse overflowed with folding chairs, cheap coffee, and simmering tension. Cheryl Beaumont, dressed in her usual prim white and navy, beamed from the podium like a queen surveying her loyal subjects. Behind her, a giant banner hung, "Willow Creek, protecting our future." She launched into her pitch, voice syrupy sweet, spinning visions of a revitalized lake, new gazebos, elegant fishing piers, community festivals, even potential waterfront upgrades, code for private boat docks for select residents. Every promise layered carefully, every smile weaponized. All she needed, she said, was the community's support and a modest investment. Just $50 a month. Just a little faith. Just enough to get her through the next 45 days. She didn't know that by then, the lake wouldn't even be hers to touch. I sat quietly in the third row, arms folded. Not yet. Not here. Patience. Let her hang herself with her own rope. The real storm was coming, and this time I controlled the weather. The room was buzzing with cautious optimism as Cheryl wrapped up her presentation. Neighbors clapped politely, exchanging uneasy glances over the proposed $50 a month fee. Cheryl's smile widened, mistaking their silence for submission. She thought she had won. She thought she had cornered everyone into compliance. She had no idea that the ground beneath her was already crumbling. When she opened the floor for questions, a few hands went up. All the usual suspects, her loyalists, eager to sing her praises. I waited until the murmurs died down. Waited until the moment the entire room teetered on the edge between skepticism and surrender. Then I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't wave my arms. I just spoke, calm, measured, like dropping stones into still water. "Madam President," I said formally, "I have a question." Cheryl's eyes narrowed slightly, but she pasted on a smile. "Of course, Mr. Cole." "In your proposal," I said, holding up a printed copy of her handout, "you mentioned new gazebos, piers, and shoreline developments. You claim these improvements will increase property values for all residents." "That's right," she said brightly. "And these developments," I continued, voice steady, "are planned for the lake." "Yes," she said, nodding. "Our lake is the crown jewel of Willow Creek. It's crucial that we—" "One problem," I interrupted gently, stepping into the center of the room. The entire clubhouse seemed to hold its breath. "The lake," I said, pulling out a manila envelope from my jacket and opening it slowly, theatrically, "is no longer under the HOA's jurisdiction." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Cheryl's face froze, her mouth hanging open in a half-formed smile. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, voice sharp now. I lifted a copy of the property deed, sealed and stamped by the county clerk. "Effective 3 days ago," I said clearly, "ownership of Willow Creek Lake and its surrounding shoreline transferred from Seabreeze Development Company to a private buyer." I let that sink in, then added almost casually, "to me." Chaos. The word doesn't do it justice. The room exploded. Neighbors shouting over each other, demanding explanations, waving the handouts Cheryl had so proudly distributed minutes earlier. Cheryl pounded the podium with her fist. "This is a lie. He's bluffing. The HOA has rights. We have—" "Actually," I said, pulling out a second document, "your lease agreement expired yesterday. And even before that, it required active maintenance of the lake's environmental health, which, according to the recent inspection report—" I held up a sheaf of photographs showing algae blooms, dead fish, water quality violations, "has been grossly neglected. The HOA's right to the lake was void, effective immediately." "You want to talk about rules, Cheryl?" I said quietly, stepping closer so only she and the first few rows could hear. "Let's talk about what happens when someone smarter, richer, and a hell of a lot angrier than you decides to play by your rules." She reeled, hands gripping the sides of the podium, knuckles white. "Residents," she called out desperately, "this man is trying to steal your community, undermine your property values." "Really?" came a voice from the back. It was Mrs. Hanover, a woman who had lived here since the first homes were built. Someone even Cheryl hadn't dared cross. "Because from where I'm sitting," she said loudly, standing up, It looks like you've been lining your pockets while fining us for things you and your friends got away with for years." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Cheryl opened her mouth, then closed it again. The dam was breaking, and she was drowning. I wasn't done. "I'll be clear," I said, turning to face the room. "My family has no intention of hoarding the lake. We're establishing a private trust to manage it. Open access for all residents, free for children's educational programs. Fishing allowed, swimming encouraged." Applause broke out, tentative at first, then growing stronger. I raised a hand for silence. "But," I added, my voice hardening, "effective immediately, the following activities are prohibited without written permission." I paused. HOA-sponsored events. Fishing tournaments organized by the HOA. Any commercial use of the lake by entities affiliated with the current HOA leadership. A few gasps, a few stifled laughs. I let the point land. Cheryl could no longer use the lake as her personal throne. Not now, not ever again. Later, after the meeting had collapsed into chaos, I watched from the shadows as Cheryl stood alone near the clubhouse entrance, abandoned even by her closest supporters. She stared out at the lake she had tried to own. She looked smaller now, shaken, defeated. For a moment, just a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I thought about Ella, about the fear in her eyes when that woman barked orders at us, like we were criminals for daring to have fun. And just like that, any sympathy I might have felt evaporated. This wasn't just about water and fines anymore. This was about tearing out the rot before it killed everything good left in this place. As I walked home that night under the stars, Ella ran out onto the porch barefoot, hair messy from sleep, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Did it work, Dad?" I lifted her into a hug, spinning her once, just because I could. "It worked, kiddo," I said, heart full to bursting. She grinned against my shoulder, and for the first time since Megan died, I realized we weren't just surviving anymore. We were winning. The storm had passed, and for the first time in a long time, Willow Creek shores felt like a place worth calling home. In the weeks after the meeting, the changes came swiftly. Cheryl Beaumont was forced to resign, her credibility shattered beyond repair. Investigations into the HOA's finances exposed a tangled web of self-dealing and favoritism. Violations that sent shockwaves through the community. Her closest allies, once smug in their positions, stepped down one by one, trying to save face but finding no refuge from the truth. The lake, our lake, had become something new. We named it Megan's Lake, a quiet tribute to the woman whose love for open skies and water had planted the dream in our hearts in the first place. A nonprofit trust was established, with bylaws written by real neighbors, not power-hungry opportunists. Free fishing passes for every child,